My name is Dean McGovern. I'm on the Board of Trustees for the City Club Missoula. And on behalf of the entire Board of Trustees, we welcome you to an extremely popular conversation today, obviously. This is one of the largest crowds we've had. If you don't know anything about the City Club, welcome, or welcome back if you've been before. We meet as a forum like this in this room every third Friday of the month. And we'll be here all year through 2006. We're not going to change the venue. And we're going to meet at 11:30 to 1 every third Friday right here. As you came in, you may have noticed membership forms. The Board of Trustees is in the process of a huge membership drive. We're trying to sustain the club, obviously quite successful. And the memberships are going to help sustain it. We receive no other funding than the fees that we charge to have lunch and come in here and these memberships. And there are a few benefits to membership that you can read about on here, one of which is a discount on these lunches and discussions. And we hope you'll consider becoming a charter member of the City Club so we can sustain it for future. Again, our next City Club forum is February 18th. That's the third Friday of February. And it's going to feature Clem Work, journalism professor from the University of Montana, talking about sedition, and it will be a very interesting discussion. On your tables, on each of your tables, there are little gray, violet sheets, and we ask for your suggestions concerning this particular forum and discussion, and suggestions and ideas for future forums and discussions. Our program committee has been quite successful over the last year and a half, putting together great discussions, and we want to continue that. They have quite a list, and we're going to have quite a program for 2006, and we invite your comments and suggestions for future forums. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Pat Williams, who is former nine-term congressman with the United States Congress, House of Representatives. He's a Butte native, and we are very fortunate to call him one of our Missoula neighbors. And he is going to introduce our moderator today. So without further ado, I give you Pat Williams.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dean. It's my privilege today to be able to introduce our moderator, who is sitting on the far right of the table, as you know, Sherry Devlin. Sherry Devlin attended and received her journalism degree from the University of Colorado. She's a Colorado native. Sherry's journalism career included several years in Colorado, where she reported for a number of different Colorado newspapers, several years as the higher education reporter for the Spokesman Review. And then 25 years ago, Sherry was expressing to a reporter friend her interest in natural resource policy as a policy that had then and she thought would have in the future even more significance to the reading public, and that was natural resources, the entire issue of natural resources. Her friend said to her, "Have you ever been to Montana? Have you ever been to Missoula, Montana?" And she said, "No." And he said, "Well, in looking through some material, I just see that the newspaper in Missoula, Montana," which he said to her is a grand little city, the newspaper's the Missoulian, and they are looking for a natural resource reporter. And so 25 years ago, Sherry Hodges, in those days, moved to Missoula, became the Missoulian natural resource reporter, became the leading natural resource reporter not only in Montana, but throughout the northern Rockies. Her first interview, her first two interviews back to back as a new natural resource reporter were with the brand new, newly appointed by the President, Chief of the Forest Service, Max Peterson. And her next interview was with a newly elected member of the United States Congress from Montana. And Sherry, I remember that interview with you very well. Last year, Sherry was appointed as the city editor for the Missoulian. And then within just the last month or so, was appointed as the editor for the Missoulian. Please greet our moderator, Sherry Devlin.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, we have a great panel of folks to talk to us today, so I'm just going to start right off with briefly introducing the our three panelists today. They're going to make some very brief remarks introducing their perspective on the proposed Bitterroot Resort and Lolo Peak development, and then we'll give all of you a chance to both discuss the issue and to ask some questions and make some responses as well. So our three panelists today, I'll begin with Tom Maclay. Tom is a fifth-generation Montanan. He was born and raised on the ranch that is at the heart of the Bitterroot Resort, and he is the Chief Executive Officer of Bitterroot Resort. Tom served for 9 years on Missoula's City-County Planning Board. He's also served on the County Weed Board, on the Electric Co-op Board, is a rancher, an avid outdoorsman, climber, mountaineer. He has an agronomy degree from MSU, and two boys, Charlie and Jacob. So Tom will be talking today about, from his perspective as CEO of the Bitterroot Resort. At the opposite end of the table is Steve Seninger. He is Director of Economic Analysis in the Bureau of Business and Economic Research at the University of Montana in the School of Business there. Steve also directs the BBER's Healthcare Policy Research Program, and you've probably seen a number of the reports that come out of his office on kids count and analysis of various healthcare issues in Montana and region-wide. Steve is a professor also in the School of Business in the Management Department. He's studied economic development and social policy issues over the past 35 years, has advised government agencies, communities, and private businesses, and he's here today as a representative of Friends of Lolo Peak. And appropriately, in the middle of the table is Maggie Pittman, who is the Missoula District Ranger for the Forest Service for the Lolo National Forest. Maggie has a degree in forestry and resource management from UM. She's worked as a forester, as a public affairs officer for the Forest Service, and as a legislative affairs specialist. She's also been an administrative officer on a number of national forests, not only here in Montana, but in Washington State as well. Maggie is here today representing herself at the Missoula Ranger District and talking from the Forest Service's perspective. So I have asked each of our panelists to talk for about 6 minutes or so here to give us an introduction to themselves and their perspective on this issue. They have two questions that they're looking at initially, and those are what is the interest that their organization has in the Lolo Peak development? And Tom will start out so that he can describe what his proposal is, what the plan is. And then from their perspective, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the project, both for the economy and for the quality of life of the Missoula area and this region. So we're going to start with Tom and give him a chance to talk briefly about the proposal, and then Steve and then Maggie. And then I'll come back and we'll throw it out to all of you to have a little table discussion and then ask some questions of our panelists while we're here. So, Tom, thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Thank you for this opportunity. Please let me know if I need to hold this mic closer. I'm not used to speaking to audiences, and much more akin to being out on the range and maybe talking to my cow dog. But I'll begin by talking about the recreational character of Missoula, of the Missoula and Ravalli counties and Montana. We love to recreate here. We love to ski and snowboard here. In fact, we are nearly 3 times as likely to identify ourselves as avid skiers than the rest of the country. We have the 5th highest concentration of snow skiers and boarders in the United States. We love to hike, love to fish, to ride, and hang out in the outdoors. There's no question that we have the support here for a world-class, sustainable, 4-season destination resort. 77% of chamber members polled support the concept of a destination ski resort as envisioned by Bitterroot Resort. In 1988, many that were here would probably remember more than 60% of Missoulians voted to support a destination resort on the peak. The land proposed for Bitterroot Resort has been designated as a potential ski resort site for more than 3 decades. In fact, I was probably about 6 years old when I first heard of this opportunity being discussed, and frankly thought somebody else would get around to it first. We are only seeking to preserve the option of such development in the future. It's only prudent planning, underscored by research that shows that Western Montana is underserved today given consumer demand for winter recreation. Research also shows that by 2015, skier demand for a fully developed Bitterroot Resort will be nearly 40% higher than demand was during this last winter season. Downhill skiing already accounts for 15% of the recreation on the Lolo and Bitterroot National Forests, a big recreational benefit being provided under highly controlled conditions on small parcels of public land. With our proposal, a century-old Montana family is committed to crafting a destination for recreation, to provide the private land on which the health of the modern-day resort economy depends. We invite a community partnership. We want your thinking about the look and feel and adventures of this new community. Bitterroot Resort is in close proximity to a growing population center in Missoula and the Bitterroot Valleys, a 4-lane highway, and a commercial airport. The resort would provide skiers and boarders an elevation and northern exposure for quality snow retention, water rights sufficient for excellent snowmaking, vast intermediate terrain that skiers and snowboarders prefer, and magnificent scenery. Bitterroot will also be a catalyst for economic growth by creating good-paying jobs, encouraging year-round tourism, increasing the dollars flowing into our communities, and attracting clean, desirable businesses to Western Montana. We are eager to work with Montana businesses to help them grow. That is a big part of the Bitterroot Resort promise. It is important to remember that the planning process currently underway does not present a mandate for action. It only establishes land use priorities. Bitterroot Resort itself will be considered in a comprehensive process prescribed by the National Environmental Policy Act only after the management plans have been completed. We are refining a proposal that would employ less than 0.4% of public land on the Bitterroot and Lolo National Forests to create a diverse, year-round recreational experience that would meet growing demand for public land recreation and help help provide the economically sustainable use of national forest lands. All of us support the goals and certainly the aesthetics of the research zone on Carlton Ridge. In fact, Bitterroot's recommended designation does not modify the Carlton Ridge Research Management Area. Moreover, Bitterroot Resort's recommendation is consistent with the expressed understanding of the Forest Service at the formation of the research area that science and skiing are compatible uses. Allocations that allow for a future ski destination can actually serve to introduce more people to the beauty of the Bitterroot Selway Wilderness backcountry. That's because Nordic skiers, young and old, alpine skiers and boarders, mountain bikers, hikers, and even persons in wheelchairs could be carried by ski lifts to relatively high elevations and miles, over 150 miles of backcountry views and adventures located south and west of Lolo Peak. As new plans are developed for these forests, allocating a small amount of public land to potential skiing provides the Forest Service flexibility to enable Montanans and future visitors to the Bitterroot Valley. We've got a 4-lane highway, and it's very easy to access this site. Furthermore, Bitterroot Resort supports the addition of 7,000 acres of adjacent wilderness south and west of Lolo Peak. We propose 8,000 acres of Forest Service terrain for alpine skiing and another 4,000 acres for Nordic skiing. A public resort is our preferred alternative for this area north of Carlton Ridge and Lolo Peak. I see the resort as a component of this great community, perhaps similar to the university or the arts community. I've been told that at one point there were more Maclay graduates of the University of Montana than any other family. The University of Montana has greatly enriched our family's life and history, and I believe this recreational resort can enrich the community's life and history as well.
As Sherry said, my name is Steve Seninger. I'm an economist, and I'm a member of Friends of Lolo Peak, working with them on community impact and economic impact analysis. And I'd like to thank the City Club for allowing us to be here today to present our point of view. Friends of Lolo Peak is a citizens-based group composed of people from all different political parties and walks of life, businesses throughout the valley, outdoor recreationists who ski, hike, fish, hunt, and know very well the Lolo Peak, Carlton Ridge area. And basically, what we're concerned about are the 12,000 acres of public land that is being asked for by the Bitterroot Resort Real Estate Development Project to be part of their operation to essentially sell real estate. And that's what our concern is the use and designation of that currently protected primitive backcountry area for a resort which essentially would put lifts, towers, roads, restaurants and such up and about Carlton Ridge and Lolo Peak. We are not against economic development. We are not against what people wish to do on their private property, subject, of course, to the usual rules and regulations of local government authorities. We are more than 300 strong. We represent people, as I said, from all different classes and walks of life, and we have not polled the Chamber of Commerce about their feelings on the Bitterroot Resort, but we have polled people throughout western Montana, and we have more than 2,500 signatures on a petition which urges that we continue to protect and keep the recreational opportunities as they currently exist for the Lolo Peak area. It also on that petition states that a resort would really be against the best interest of the current state of that land. Now, what we're being asked to do in this case is 12,000 acres out of 15,000, so you're looking at 3,000 private land, 12,000 public land. And basically, as we look at ski resorts and we look at the development of them from a national perspective and in terms of industry conditions, essentially what happens in the ski industry is that skiing is a losing proposition, and the way you make your money on that is through real estate. So while it's nice to think in terms of whizzing downhill, essentially what you're doing is talking about high-end real estate development. The land itself, the landscape that would be involved in all of this is, as I think most of us know from our views of it every day, is a magnificent guardian and centerpiece of our valleys, both the Missoula and the Bitterroot Valley. And it's a land that in fact offers all kinds of recreational opportunities to a wide group of people, whether they're hiking, taking their grandkids up there, going fishing, backcountry skiing, hunting, trail riding, or whatever. It contains a research natural area, which our scientific community tells us is unique and, in fact, not only needs to be protected, which it would not happen under a ski resort, it needs to be expanded. And then finally, it's quality wildlife habitat for all kinds of animals as well as flora and fauna. Another fact about the land I think we need to keep in perspective is that that land and that setting and land like that throughout our region serves an important economic role. In fact, when you look at the strong economic growth that we've experienced over the past 15 years, and as you look at most projections, in fact, all projections that suggest continued economic growth, that kind of land is exactly the economic asset which attracts firms, new households, new businesses, entrepreneurs into this region. So it's an important thing for us in terms of what it means spiritually, recreationally, and economically. Now, in terms of the other part of the questions about advantages and disadvantages, you really have to cast that in terms of what do we get in terms of giving up 12,000 acres of our public land as a community or communities affected by the ski resort real estate development. And essentially, the question can be answered by looking at quality of life factors or elements. When we look at the quality of life in our region, it's based on open spaces, natural landscapes, jobs with livable wages, affordable housing, community involvement, participation in the local economy, property taxes that are not out of control yet. And basically what we do when we look, and in my analysis, at the impact of the Bitterroot Resort, it's a question of what happens to those different factors in our quality of life. There will obviously be some advantages to the Bitterroot Resort. As Tom has mentioned, there will be some economic impacts. There will be, for example, construction jobs during the initial resort development, housing construction phase for the high-end housing for out-of-state homeowners. Although one has to be cautious about looking at that because our construction sector currently is stretched very thin, and it's quite likely for most analyses that the workers that would take up those jobs would be from outside our area. Indeed, many of the firms would be quite likely from outside of Missoula. So that's an advantage, good construction jobs. There would be significant profits for developers and realtors, and then there would be another ski area that we would have in this area to go along with the 6 we currently have in close proximity to Missoula. The disadvantages, I think, are more significant in terms of what they would do to our quality of life. Jobs, based on my research for these kinds of resort real estate projects, are essentially low-wage jobs without benefits, frequently taken up by workers from outside the area. Indeed, many resorts go out and recruit their workforce from outside the region or outside the country. Housing prices, from my research in resort real estate projects like this, of this kind of scale, significantly jump up to a higher level and a higher rate of change. You can see that obviously when you're looking at $700 and $800 and $900 million plus homes in places like Big Sky, Sun Valley, Jackson Hole, etc. Obviously, when housing and land values go up, property taxes go up. And there's other kinds of infrastructure impacts in terms of roads, some mention of which Tom had made reference to, and also providing public health services to workers who will not have benefits on the job. Another aspect is what kinds of folks will be coming in response to these very expensive homes. And it's not the kind of people we've had moving in here in the past 15 to 20 years who become an integral part of our community in terms of involvement, contributing in the local economy and such. So basically, as we, Friends of Lolo Peak, and as I, as a professional economist, look at the trade-offs, there are some advantages, obviously, which I've mentioned, to having another ski resort in the area. But there are some real downside factors in terms of low-wage jobs that are part-time, in terms of impact on housing, in terms of impact on property, and it makes it really a very questionable economic proposition for the communities that are impacted by this resort. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Maggie Pittman with the Forest Service. I have the pleasure of working as the ranger at the Missoula district of the Lolo National Forest. And Steve, coming behind you, you're clearly a longtime college professor. I am not nearly as poised or polished, so please allow me while I refer to a few notes that I have here in front of me. The question Sherry's asked, what interest does the Forest Service have in the development? And if the question relates to the current development on private land near Lolo, then our interest rests in mitigating any impacts that the private land development may have on the public lands contained in the Bitterroot and the Lolo National Forests. The Forest Service will work to maintain, protect, and enhance the resource values on those nearby public lands. Values such as elk winter range, access to public land, healthy forests and watersheds, the Carlton Ridge Research Natural Area, the roadless area, and the nearby Selway Bitterroot Wilderness Area. They are all and will continue to be important assets on our public lands in this area. As a neighbor to the current private land development, we'll manage the public land as our current contracts with you direct. The Lolo and Bitterroot forest plans, which were signed in the 1980s, ensure that we will provide healthy forests and accessible use to the public in concert with the current forest plan management allocations. Our interest in the Bitterroot Resort to date has been to work through the process for evaluating the initial concept design for an alpine ski area development. Let me give you a quick review of that process and where we've come. An outline of that special use permitting process that we use frequently internally is the green sheet that Ingrid so nicely put on your table. So if you want to refer to that, I'm not going to go through it specifically, but it does outline our two-step process. Bitterroot Resort reps presented an initial conceptual plan for a ski area near Lolo Peak in February 2005, just about a year ago. Resource staff folks from the Lolo and the Bitterroot forests reviewed that plan for its compliance with current forest plan standards. In March, just a month after we got the initial plan, the forest responded to the proponents with a denial of their plan because it was inconsistent with our current forest plans. Essentially, it wasn't in compliance with the management standards that we've set up and the allocations for what we felt was suitable for the public lands in the area. We suggested to the Bitterroot Resort folks that they either rework their plan to be in compliance with the current forest plans, or they rework it as we go through and revise our forest plans, which is the process that we're in right now. And they rose to that occasion. Representatives of the resort have attended many meetings over the past several months to become familiar with the forest plan revision process and to gain an understanding of the public desires and concerns for those public lands near Lolo Peak. To date, we have not received a new conceptual plan or a proposal for a new special use permit application for an alpine ski area near Lolo Peak. If we did receive a new proposal, however, for a developed recreation facility on public land near Lolo Peak, we would work to provide a timely response to the proponents. We would ensure that the two forests were consistent in our decision-making process. We would ensure that any use that would be authorized would be in the public interest, and we would ensure that any authorized use complied with our forest, land, and resource management plans. Now, relative to the notion of advantages and disadvantages, I think that since there is no formal proposal for development on public land at this time, it's a bit premature for me to comment on any advantages and disadvantages. I do believe, however, that the economy and quality of life in Missoula benefit greatly by the intrinsic value of the public lands that surround us. I suspect each of us carry with us our own personal set of attributes that make this country so special and meaningful to each of us. Your being here today is a testament to how passionate you are about the management of your public lands. I think the greatest advantage of nearby public land to any citizen is the opportunity to have your voice heard regarding the management of your public land. There is not an acre of public land or a foot of public stream bank that is not deserving of debate and scrutiny. Public land managers in the Northern Rockies are so fortunate to serve an informed and engaged public. To that end, I'd like to tell you how you can continue to be involved in the forest plan revision process and the discussion about the management of the Lolo Peak area and the revision of the Bitterroot and the Lolo National Forest plans. Since both forests are included in the Western Montana Planning Zone, the plans for both forests are currently being revised under one process. Many of you have been intimately involved over the past year in the revision process. I see many familiar faces that I got to know this summer. Many of you gave up your summer evenings to participate in a collaborative process helping us refine what will become the preferred option in our draft forest plans. We've appreciated the help you've given us, and it's been extremely valuable. Where we're at today is we're in the final stages of developing the draft forest plans. They will be out probably about late March. We've had several kind of internal reviews. We're still going through those, fine-tuning it. Beginning in April, we will start a round of public open houses that we promised we'd do. You'll have an opportunity to look at the draft forest plan for the Bitterroot, the Lolo, and the Flathead National Forests, as we're all part of the Western Montana Planning Zone. And we're offering a 90-day comment period, which I hope we'll hear some well-informed and thoughtful comments from you. In April, we'll have a round of open houses in all the communities that we serve, and specifically in Missoula, we'll have an open house, I don't know the location yet, but it'll be on April 6th. It's critical that we hear from you during the upcoming 90-day public review period. The revised plans will be our contract with you for how we manage the national forest and your public lands for the next 10 to 15 years. Thanks.
Okay, this is the chance where you all get to get involved. For about the next 10 minutes, we're going to have discussions at your tables. One thing that would be helpful during that discussion is if some of you folks or all of you folks who are sitting in the back might want to join tables up here at the front if we bunched up a little bit more than we are. And what we're going to do is there are yellow pieces of paper on your table with 3 questions on it that would help prompt your discussions. What does the project mean for Missoula? What processes do you suggest would help the community decide whether they think the project is good for Missoula? And what would you like to know about the development that you don't? Each table should have one person who's going to act as a spokesperson for your table at the end of the 10 minutes. And then I'm going to come around, and that will be your chance to ask a question or make some kind of response to the folks up here who are on the panel. So I'll be looking for each table to give me one question, and we'll answer those for the last part of our program here today. So go ahead and start discussing, and these folks are going to join you at the tables. If everybody could turn your attention back up here. I'm going to start walking around. We're going to go kind of from table to table. I'm going to start over here because I saw they had a list of questions. And each table can either ask one question or make some kind of response if you would like to do that. And then we'll have, quickly we'll have our panelists answer the questions that you came up with at your tables. And I'm not going to go in any particular order. I'm just going to try to hit a variety of tables so we get back to the back part of the room as well, and try to answer as many questions as we can in the next 20 minutes or so here. Where? You want to start? Okay.
My name is Frank Kleshin, and I want to introduce Gary and Frank. They live right down at the, they live, no, and where the, Tom, show them where they live. That's where these two guys live. So, well, not together. No, they have separate homes, people. Anyway, Gary or Frank is going to ask a question.
I want to tell you how the enjoyment I've had sitting next to Frank today, first of all. But no, we had a few questions, and Don, was it Williamson? Nicholson. Had a question, and he had to leave, so he wanted to know if the development would go forward without the federal forest land, just on the Maclay land.
Okay. So what happens if the Forest Service says no?
I appreciate the question, and I very much, again, appreciate this opportunity, the chance to actually have a direct dialogue and address questions you do have, and we do try and get back to people on questions here. What you've got, given the demand in this area, if you don't have public lands for skiing, is for alpine skiing. You don't have enough capacity for the demand that we confidently see out there. And realizing, of course, the passing of Marshall, among other things, at least not that they can't come back, but we don't see it happening, any sign of that happening. So there simply is not enough area to accommodate the need.
Well, I noticed, Tom, that you didn't answer the question that was asked. So you could try it again in a minute if you want.
It's just a little stage fright here. It's the deer in the headlights thing. Again, this is not my normal routine. But the question, as I understood it, was what would happen if we don't end up with a permit on forest land as far as the ski area. We have a lot of private options. We don't need to go into those. But let's just put it this way, even if we had a semi-private ski area, for instance, we would probably be over capacity and have to look at some restriction on that capacity as other ski areas do. Does that answer your question? Or in people's mind? Well, the development will occur. There's no question about that. This, as I understand, is a question on a public resort and a public opportunity. And there are other opportunities besides that. We certainly hope, again, to fulfill a public place and a public resort opportunity and to utilize the full facilities that we've grown up with in our backyard.
Yes, at our table we have a comment and a question. At our table, all the people at our table were skeptical about the value to the Missoula area. Skeptical is putting it mildly of the ski area development. Sharon at our table was involved in conducting a survey of the 59 resident. What? Petition, yeah. She contacted 59 people in the Carlton Ridge area, and of those, 50 people signed a petition against the ski area development. And I think our general comment is that the people at our table appreciate the value and the quality of life that the Missoula area currently provides and don't see the need or the benefit for this kind of development. And in fact, we are very, very, very much concerned that this kind of development would be contrary to the kinds of values that the people at this table most appreciate for living in the Missoula area. One of the things that we also commented on was that we think that there needs to be, before this kind of development goes, and I know this is not the Forest Service responsibility, but it's certainly an issue for the greater community, and perhaps Steve could respond to this. We need to have some kind of evaluation of the social benefit to the Missoula area that's objective and straightforward and not biased, so that the Missoula people can really realize what they're risking and what they're giving up. And we're wondering whether or not there might be some potential for getting this kind of evaluation done.
Yeah, I guess the question is about a more comprehensive economic impact analysis. And clearly, I've just scratched the surface based on my research, and we could do more work on that. And I think the other part of that, too, is that this is really broader than just economic impact. I think it has to do with, as Sterling mentioned, our community and our values, and what kind of growth and what kind of sustainable community we want to see in the long run. So I think that would be a much larger discussion and analysis over and above the impact of the Bitterroot Resort on the community.
Is there another table that's ready with a question that you'd like to ask? Okay, we'll go back there.
I had a question for, we had a question for Maggie Pittman, and it seems from the Forest Service process up to now, and particularly some of the meeting, the big meeting at the DoubleTree, I guess last summer, that the overwhelming sense in those meetings was of opposition to this. I mean, it seemed that just from a numbers standpoint, that most of the people involved in that process were opposed. So I'm interested to know from the Forest Service planning standpoint, what would be the criteria for approving this kind of change in the plan? In other words, what might be the reasoning in light of the fact that most of the public comment you're getting is opposed to the change that would allow this? What might be the reasoning to allow it anyway?
Come on, Sherry.
Will this stretch?
How we doing? Okay, I'll trade you. Good question. So the question essentially relates to what would the process be to make that change in allocation and suitability? And that's exactly the process that we're going through when we're talking about revising our forest plans. And sir, if that picture gets in the newspaper, it's going to look like I bled on my leg because I spilled strawberry on me. So I didn't bleed on my leg. So what we've got is that in the suitability question and the allocation question that we're under right now, we take into account the needs and the highest public interest for the longest good that we can imagine when we try to allocate suitable management area recommendations for all across the national forest. And so in order for those allocations to change, we would need to determine that there was a higher need or a higher use than what we currently have the area allocated for. So right now in the current forest plan and in the option that you all reviewed over the summer, our what we offered up was what we essentially have as status quo, which is the inventoried roadless area, the research natural area, and kind of a backcountry emphasis up there. So under Mr. Maclay's option that he offered up, those allocations as they are now would remain unless he could make his proposal work within those allocations. So he would significantly have to alter his proposal in order to be within compliance for those standards that we've set. Likewise, for any new allocation that might come out in the draft forest plan that will be out for public review within the next few months, if there's a change in our preferred option, the Bitterroot Resort folks would have to alter their plan to make it consistent with those new allocations if there are any.
I think you all had.
Hi, I'm Bill, and our table is a little puzzled, I think. We have a number of skiers who wouldn't mind stepping off a tram at the top of Lolo Peak. On the other hand, we're puzzled because we thought we were here discussing not a small development on Mr. Maclay's land, but the use of public land on the Lolo Peak side, which is barely pictured in the right-hand side of that picture. And as we understand it, his website advertises North America's largest ski resort. And so we're imagining another Aspen for better or for worse. And we think the discussion has not been addressing the reality of a large ski area which has at least 10 times the amount of acreage devoted to condo and high-end home development than to skiing. And it is industry knowledge, as we saw in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times last year, that ski resorts now with skier days flattened out make their money off real estate. And if you look at the plans for, say, Big Sky at a meeting like this, the plans they submitted for their initial development are nothing compared to the approximately 100 square miles of real estate development now going on above them up and down that valley. So we are imagining many, many runs off of Carlton Ridge, as your other maps show. When you have an aerial view, most of the development is on the Lolo Peak, not on the private lands, and we assume that's what we're discussing. Now then, does Missoula want another Aspen? That's the question, which is a large real estate development built around the lifestyle of skiing and golf as a magnet. And we think if we face that's the question, then we want to know what are the instruments by which Missoula can control its own fate, rather than have big money doing it, intra-West, hundreds of millions of dollars helping something like that out, or Washington, D.C. telling the Forest Service what to do behind our backs. So that's the question, and therefore, I'm speaking personally now, not for the table, I think that the default position on the resort, not on your land, Tom, that's your business, but on the big picture, which is not pictured, the default position should be absolutely not until the developers come to us with full disclosure and the community spends a year or two realistically assessing the consequences of another Aspen. Is that the kind of money we want? Will it produce a super rich class in minimum wage rather than a middle class that the health industry gives us another thing? So we feel the questions aren't even being addressed yet, and we would like the community tools to take community control of the analysis and the answers.
Tom, would you like to address the bigger picture as well, or?
You bet. You bet. Thank you. First off, I'd never before in the previous two times that this resort has been proposed, that is 1966 through 1971 and 1988 through 1991, heard of this as a real estate project. We've been talking about a ski project. In 1988 through 1991, there were about 45 acres of base area real estate out of the Mill Creek area. And I think realistically that was not enough to attract a developer given the incredible risk and the massive capital investment that it would take to do this project. Basically, I've added about 10% of what previously had been termed alternate access off Carlton Ridge to my lands, but I've added about 10% to the pre-existing proposal that's existed, really looked at since the 60s. As far as what a community would look like, Salt Lake City has 10 very large ski resorts. You've got, I haven't heard of anybody talking about that degrading the quality of life of Salt Lake City. And what you've got is a completely different situation in a community like Aspen or Vail or Jackson Hole. Jackson Hole has a very precious land base that is essentially a commodity. It gets bid up. There's about 3% privately available land in the Jackson Hole area versus about 45% here that's in private hands and thus can be used for development. We're also very dispersed in this community of at least 130,000 people right now. 130,000 people. I've heard some very intelligent people asking how we're going to fit in the next 100,000 people. And I think that's really the question that we need to ask ourselves. How are we going to shape the community going forward? That's the key here today in my mind, and I certainly hope to engage all of you in that, because I think we can create the future that we want, and we can create it in a way that we enjoy living here. Frankly, that's what I took on when I decided to stay ranching here. I didn't want to go somewhere else. I didn't want to sell off to a movie star. I wanted to stay here and enjoy living here and be able to raise a family here.
Who'd like to be the next?
Our table, I think maybe what would be most useful, I'll be a little quicker here since a lot of these issues are already being addressed, but looking at the second question on process, we talked about the fact that the main process right now is the forest plan revision, and yet, as we've been all seeing, this is a private land, public land connection, and by focusing just on the Forest Service side of it, and that it doesn't give us an opportunity to look at how it's connected in a cross-boundary sort of way. And as we are seeing today, this is a major proposal with a lot of potential changes for Missoula and in a changing community. We have pretty strong feelings about the value of pristine Lolo Peak, but at the same time, we're also thinking about this opportunity, as Tom just talked about, for more of a public dialogue about how we grow and what the issues are. And one thought we had was involving members of Congress. Of course, we've got Carol Williams at our table, both state and federal, in this a little bit more in terms of helping with this dialogue. And the question arose is, what is the role of Congress, and even at the federal level, in ultimately making a decision, I suppose, particularly when it affects the forest plan? Okay.
Hey, Maggie, you've been elected to Congress.
Wow, Deborah. Pat, can I answer this question? Deborah, what I understand with the role of Congress relative to me as the district ranger of Missoula, Montana, is beyond my comprehension, to be honest. So, gosh, you kind of got me on that one. We look at the forest plan situation that we're under here as our contract with folks that use and love the national forest in and around our area. So to be honest, I'm not in a place in my daily existence when I go to work to think about how it's going to relate and what Congress might do with the forest plan. Now there may be options for if there is some conversation that happens at a higher level, far above me, that I wouldn't even be privy to. Things are known to happen on national forests. And whatever those are, it's never happened to me. So I feel I'm completely evading your question. If I'm doing a good job of it, I'm hopeful that you'll think that, I sufficiently did not answer your question, because I can't. So.
We had a hard time because we had two questions. I'm going to try to squeeze them in. And one is, Maggie, what's the current level of use up in that area right now by recreationists, if you have an idea of the number of people and types of people that are using the area? And the second would be probably for Tom and or Steve. And I'd like to have Tom address the potential for more future landslides on Carlton Ridge if we see bulldozers and development up there.
Okay, so there are two questions, one about the current use up there, and then a question about the landslides and kind of the geographic or geologic integrity.
I'll start with the first, Bob. We, on the Missoula district and on the Stevensville district, who share management in that area you mentioned, plenty of use, lots of use relative to kind of backcountry interest. Cross-country skiing, we've got the Lolo Pass Visitor Center. There's a lot of interest in history up in this area. There's the Carlton Ridge Research Natural Area that takes in not just recreational folks, but people who are interested in the science and the history of those high alpine larch. There's folks that utilize that trail to hike up to Carlton Lake. It's a very popular trail. So it's a wide mix of folks, generally backcountry, mostly non-motorized, because of the designations that we have up there. So, and I'm speaking mostly in the upper area of the country there.
I'll follow up. As I mentioned to Maggie, I could address that question as well as far as use. particularly in the Carlton Ridge area, as this was my stomping grounds growing up, whether snowshoeing the peak, whether riding motorcycles, et cetera, and having our access as this adjoins the ranch. It's certainly been a great backyard to grow up. But in 30 trips to the top of the ridge last year, I saw one other set of ski tracks. Okay, the same vertical mile that makes this great skiing makes it largely inaccessible for people during the winter. Summer use under our proposal would largely be unchanged, but because you can access similarly as you do now up through the Mormon Saddle, that's where the access goes. Let's see. Then the next question, if you could, landslides. And that's a good question too. And who knows, maybe that's one of these questions that goes to Maggie's previous answer, because in 1978, the Forest Service hydrologist was able to accurately identify exactly what zone would be unstable. And we know that an environmental impact statement or an environmental review, we would analyze all of these factors. The important thing is we can easily analyze and determine with accuracy where these zones might occur and avoid them, or work through whatever might be most appropriate. But it's taken me, frankly, 20 years to work through that process and the impacts that it's had on our ranch. And the important thing is it's easily identified, and for whatever reason, I presume it was pressure for public access to get back in there, that the road was rebuilt, it triggered a massive landslide. That doesn't need to be done in the future. Good science is shown that it can easily avoid that.
Could I say just one thing? A couple of additional quick points on that question. Friends of Lolo Peak did collect over 200 signatures at the trailhead on 2 weekends in the summer up there off of Mormon Creek Road. And then secondly, when Mormon Creek Road is open in the spring, you go up there and take a look at the number of people who are snowboarding, snowshoeing, and skiing up onto the ridge and the peak. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's just a lot of folks up there at that time with road access that way.
Could I follow up one question? Just that does raise one point. The normal ski season presumed is from Thanksgiving to Easter, so it wouldn't interfere again with that normal spring rite that I've enjoyed too in the Carlton Basin.
Pat Williams had something he's going to clarify about Congress.
Thank you.
That previous question where Maggie was hesitant to answer, she did say that sometimes they just take orders from on high, either the Congress or the Forest Service. And I happen to know about something that I think is probably necessary to share with you. I don't have a dog in this fight, and I'm not sure if this resort ought to go up or not. I just don't know, and I don't think it's my job to have to be part of it. But you ought to know this, because the question got at whether or not there's a conspiracy from on high somehow. People on high came to the developers and said, "Do you want to slam dunk this? We can pave the way for this. We can send the orders down, and we'd like to do it for the development." And Tom, or the people that worked with him, said, "No. This is Missoula's choice. Let's do this fairly and in the open." And they're to be credited for that.
I was wondering if the preferred allocation revision, I guess that's what you call it, which will be due in March, is necessary to be completed before the resort can submit their plans. And then who makes the final decision? That's what I was wondering.
Thank you again. That's a great question. And in my opinion, we need that opinion to go forth and do the appropriate science, back to the landslide question, to make a realistic proposal. We don't see any reason to waste anybody's time making an unrealistic or a vague proposal. Access and a good analysis is key, and that's the normal step once we would have the appropriate plan revision that would allow developed skiing.
Yeah, Frank, what we've got when the preferred option comes out and we have a 90-day review period, what the process calls for is that we'll collect all the public input that we gather and that we receive, and we'll go through studying that and revising the preferred option, and then we'll issue a final forest plan. And the final will have management area allocations that will allow certain uses. And so if the new allocation, if it changes from the existing, if it is prohibitive of what Tom's initial proposal had been, then Tom will need to rework it to fit within that current allocation. Now, there are options for amending the forest plan, so that could happen in the future if he so chose to work through that route as well.
I'd like to thank Tom, Maggie, and Steve for being our panelists today, and all of you for joining in the discussion. We're out of time, but I think you folks will be available here because there were lots more questions. So if you'd like to come and ask your questions in person, please do that. And thank you all for being here.